Good morning. I'm going to provide a reflection on this idea of being crippled in spirit. That's the focus of what attracted me in today's gospel, what really spoke to me in today's gospel. So bear with me as I work with the metaphors in this gospel and perhaps tell a couple of stories. This story can resonate, I think, with many of us. Almost everyone knows what it feels like to have the weight of the world on our shoulders and feel like we have the weight of the world on our shoulders, and it can distract us terribly. It can just overwhelm us. It's so easy to lose perspective when we're focused on that weight. And we can lose sight of the world as it really is around us. And as importantly, we can lose sight of how we perhaps want to shape that world. I was raised in the suburbs of New York City. We were a family of 5, mom, dad, me, and my 2 brothers. I'm the middle child, so that explains a lot of how I operate in the world. Our next-door neighbors, the Marcys, were a family of 9 with 2 sets of twins, and we grew up playing together. I'm of that generation raised in the 60s and 70s where we were shoot outside, get on your bike and go. Go play. It's a different world now. That's not as common. But we were just out and about riding miles in the city, in the suburbs where I was fortunate enough to be raised. So the next door neighbors, that family of 9, one of the children grew up to be an inner city ER trauma physician. Inner city being inner New York City. And at that time it was Brooklyn, which, not the fashionable Brooklyn of today, it was the unfashionable, rather crime-ridden Brooklyn at that time period. His name's John, and he's still my older brother's best friend. As John lived through the horrors that an inner city ER doctor experiences on a daily basis, seeing so many difficult and challenging things, he became a different person. He became hardened, much more distant, less friendly, really self-protective and shut down. Not really healthy. My mom and Mrs. Marcy were of an age together, and though not best friends, they were friends because their kids were friends. When my father died when I was 19, the Marcys were really good neighbors. They were really good friends to us, really good help to us. Many years later, when all the kids were out of both houses, and it was Mom and ours and Mr. and Mrs. Marcy and theirs rambling around too large a home for so few people, and yet unwilling yet to give up the family homestead. And this is a dozen years after John, the inner city doctor, had been working as this trauma physician in the ER. At that time period, Mrs. Marcy was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. When John learned the news, he immediately made an appointment to go see Mrs. Marcy's doctor. And I remember John coming back from that visit and him saying, at that visit, he felt like 2 disparate people. When he was looking at the scans of his mom's body, one part of him was seeing and understanding the extent of the disease represented in those medical charts. And he could see clinically what was going on. And the second part of him was screaming, "This can't be my mom. This can't be happening." Truly a diverge. He felt really like 2 different people. Mrs. Marcy lived another 5 to 6 months, And for the first 3 of those, she came over to my mom's house every afternoon at 5 o'clock and had a glass of wine to just chat. As she got closer to dying and she was no longer either able to drink the wine nor walk across the backyards to the back doors of the houses, my mom would go over and visit her until she passed into unconsciousness and soon after that died. John, the ER doctor, changed after his mother's diagnosis and her quick journey into the nearer embrace of God. He told me he became more present and vulnerable to the families of those he treated, whose lives they were trying to save. He became more vulnerable and present to them. He said he understood better the trauma the family was suffering while their loved ones were trying to be treated behind the scenes in the ER trauma center. John began to see the world through a different lens, in a different perspective than the clinical one he had lived in prior to the experience with his mom's illness. Today, Jesus heals a woman who has been crippled in spirit for 18 years. Crippled in spirit for 18 years. Jesus initiates contact with her, heals her, and this bent-over woman stands up straight and immediately praises God. If we take this healing as a metaphor, what conclusions can we draw from it? Now, Jesus approaches a woman, someone at that time considered lesser than her male counterparts, yet he approaches her. This individual who's been ignored for 18 years because her infirmity was indicative of some sin in her past or something that she was being punished for, as that in that time period would have been understood as. And Jesus heals her, and immediately she praises God and eventually brings the whole crowd along in her praise. Being crippled in spirit can cause us to see through a lens more narrowly than is healthy for us. I don't know about all of you, the last 2.5 years of pandemic, and the last 6 years of this cultural change in our society that we've all been living through has made me frustrated and tired, and at times angry. I'm angry at the political climate in this country. I'm angry by the loss of politeness and kindness that used to exist. It still does. But it's not the norm right now, is it? It should be. I'm frustrated and tired by the refusal of our society to work, or having lost the idea of working toward a common good. It's become very narcissistic in our society, hasn't it? It's about me, it's about what I want, it's what I can get. Forget about you. Forget about us. Forget about them. It's about me and what I need. Frustrates the heck out of me. And I'm also frustrated by how hard it is to seem to get any traction to make any change. How to make a difference. That frustration, that exhaustion, and yes, that rage, narrows my ability to see more clearly. A colleague of mine at CDSP, who is the theologian, the associate professor of theology, his name is Scott McDougall. He's a friend of mine from New York, believe it or not. We both ended up at the same place. He has coined a phrase, the outrage industrial complex, and he's referring to journalism and activism and social media and even political strategy, that it's a kind of a closed loop circle that just feeds on itself constantly. We're mad, we're going to get madder, we're going to get madder. And this outrage industrial complex, this loop of anger that we can get caught into makes it more opaque about how to see clearly. And we have to break out of that somehow. The struggle to create a more just world is no less important today than it was yesterday or last month or last year or this past century or in Jesus' time. After all, that's one of Jesus' precepts, was trying to create a more just world. How do we take action to reflect that just world? Our actions can reflect a just world. But what steps do we take to remove ourselves from that opaqueness, from that frustration? When we operate out of fear and anxiety, it is nearly impossible to catch a vision of the common good. So it starts here. It starts with me, so I'm being narcissistic right now, saying, but I have to get myself out of that loop. We all have to take a step back from that loop and take a breath and find hope and find love. We need to liberate ourselves from that outrage first. And when we have done that, which we can do, though it's easy to fall back into the outrage, we need to consciously try not to do that. And then love people. Love them where they are. Not to fix them, but to love them and to know them. And by loving them, we can love them out of their fear and outrage and anxiety, giving all of us a space to move toward seeking the flourishing of all. Honestly, letting go of outrage is good for us. It's healthy for us to let go of it. Because, honestly, it's a terrible feeling to live in that. And it's freeing to step away from it. To step away from that sickened spirit. I would caution us not to go down the road that smacks of performance virtue, which is we're doing something to make us feel better. Doing something to help someone else will make us feel better, but that's not the reason to do it. It's the actual action that's important, not how it makes us feel. So it's focusing our energies, as St. John's does so well, on local groups where we can actually engage with the communities in which we live and make a difference in the lives of those around us. You know, Wendell Berry, one of my favorite authors, continually reflected in his writings on the ambiguity and imperfection in which we all live our lives. Ambiguity and imperfection. And even with those tangible difficulties, we shouldn't seek perfection, Wendell Berry often said, nor try to make enormous change, but to live as Jesus did. Make personal connections, change people's perceptions and their understandings of the world in very granular ways. And that helps reshape attitudes and a willingness to engage further with more people. So it's engaging with people from whom we have been holding ourselves back. Like my friend John held himself back so long from those. And his attitude changed his relationship with his clients and changed their perception of what doctors are like and what the world can be like. You know, these small changes absolutely alter the world, not only our perception, but the reality we live in.